to the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, 78% of farmers consider information from farm broadcasters highly trustworthy. When you need to reach rural America effectively, choose the voices they already trust. Visit IllinoisFarmRadio.com and discover how Ag Radio can elevate your agricultural marketing strategy.
WTIM. This is the WTIM Morning Show on your information station. The show is sponsored by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Reed Kamai, and we are now just under 2 weeks away from the spring primary. That, of course, is happening on Tuesday, March 17th. And you'll have a lot of races to vote in on your ballot. And they include the races for the primaries for the U.S. House. And one of those candidates joins me in the studio right now. And I'm talking about Judy Bowlby, who is a Republican candidate for the 15th Congressional District. And so that'll be one of the many primaries happening on March 17th here in Illinois. Judy, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you on. And we'll get to talk a little bit about you. I'd love to start just to know a little bit about what it is that's motivated you to run for Congress.
Well, I had retired in 2020 and kind of settled into a very peaceful life. And I will say that over the last year or two, as I watched the news, I became increasingly frustrated. And what I mean is, it seems to me that things have gone so far to the right and so far to the left, and that constant bickering among our people in office was just totally upsetting to me and to my neighbors. And I just looked at that situation and I thought there's got to be a better way for us to handle conflict and to get things done for the people we represent. And, you know, one of the reasons I know that so well is because when I retired, right before I retired, I'd spent the last 30 years of my life in a government affairs job where all I did was negotiate legislation and policy between Democrats and Republicans. And I was very successful at that. And I just could not understand why it cannot be happening now. And so I decided to throw my hat into the ring and run for office.
And you talked a little bit about, you know, some of the negotiating work. I mean, it sounds like policy making work or policy writing work. How is I mean, it sort of answers the next question I was going to ask. What other ways has your personal and professional background kind of shaped the way you intend to approach being a U.S. Congresswoman?
Okay. Well, one of the many things that I did when I was negotiating with Democrats and Republicans for different policy and legislation is it's very important to actually find those moderates in the party. I kind of compare it to, we try to teach our children that you can't always have your own way. You have to negotiate, you have to compromise. And what I find is the moderates in the parties will do that. And so I would find usually a Republican and a Democratic sponsor for any bill so that there was bipartisan working in favor to begin with. And then I would reach out to different associations and advocacy groups that had a part in what was happening. And I found that their influence in talking to their legislator was very important in that. And many times I sometimes brought in people who had an issue to testify in front of committees, just regular citizens. So there's a way to do that. And the thing that frustrates me when that is not getting done, the people are the ones that suffer because they're left, legislators get their pay, they go home, or they call, they're not in session because they're arguing, and we're left holding the bag. And that just can't keep on going.
Yeah, so you talked a little about there. Now, in terms of what those issues are, what do you see as like some of the more important issues facing this district? In terms of issues that apply to urban voters, ones that apply to rural voters, what kind of stands out to you?
Okay, well, basically, the thing that affects everybody is the kitchen table issues, the cost of housing, the cost of groceries, the increasing cost of groceries. Now we're seeing an increasing cost in gas because of what's happening overseas. Those affect everyone. This district is over 31% farmers. The farmers have been completely devastated by the tariffs. And many times, I'm close to the agriculture area because I grew up in a small farm in Cerro Gordo. I was raised by my aunt and uncle, and we were tenant farmers, so it was like a sharecropping situation. And so I know, what the farmers have to face because they have to be somewhat like gamblers. They have to worry about the weather. They have to worry about the cost of the things that they need to produce the product. That's one of the things that's impacted too in terms of the tariffs, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of seed, the cost of machinery. And many farmers right now are really hurting because of the deal that was made between China and Brazil and not having that, losing that market because of the tariffs. So being very close to the agriculture community, from my beginning, being raised on a farm, was actually expanded during the time that I was in college. For a year of my life in college, I worked as an ambassador for the American Soybean Association. So what I did for them is I traveled throughout the United States talking about the soybean market, the nutritional aspects of the soybean. I did cooking shows. I did farm broadcasting shows, educating the public about the soybean market. In addition, they sent me overseas, and in terms of working with international markets, in particular, I went to Mexico and worked there in terms of trying to increase markets for the farmer. So my agricultural background is strong in that respect. And, when we look at what happens, when we look at the increased cost of groceries, increase now in gas, housing, the farming market being devastated, and I look at what kind of legislation could be done to help those people. And one thing you can do, this is probably the thing that frustrates me the most with the incumbent that is in office. You have, as a legislator, I would be one of 435. But what is the one thing that I could do? Each congressperson is given something called a way to apply for community project funds. And those are funds that are available to each congressperson to bring back to the district. It's federal dollars. And there are categories that money can be used for. An example, it can be used for infrastructure such as roads and bridges. It can be used for, improving water systems or septic, waterway systems. And it can be used for hospitals that are in need. And that money has not been touched by the current congressman for 5.5 years. She is the only congressperson who has not brought that money back for her own philosophical reasons. She's only made a change in that in the very end of last year. And I think one of the reasons she made the change is because myself and every other opponent, be it Democrat or Republican, are bringing that up. And that how that affects the voter, how that affects the person in the 15th congressional district. If you don't have those federal dollars, that means that your local community has to fix something. So you get charged local tax dollars. So in essence, you're paying for it twice. You're paying for it because your money goes to the federal government. Then you're paying for it again because it gets taxed on local monies. And just to give you an example, the 15th district is as big as literally 4 East Coast states. It's a huge territory. We've gotten no money for the last 5.5 years in terms of the community project funding. And yet the 13th district, has gotten, $30 million. You think about, just as an example, in fact, every congressperson in Illinois has brought money back except the current incumbent. So that is one thing I would walk right in and start working on the paperwork with the communities that are in need to get that money for them.
Yeah, and then actually, you sort of led into the next question I was going to ask you. Referenced the geographical size of this congressional district. How do you kind of ensure you reach everyone you'll be representing in of course, it is largely a rural area, but
Yes.
there's also some urban elements of it. How do you kind of make sure you're reaching everyone, both in terms of like hearing about them and covering everything that folks are going to need?
It is a very difficult area to access because of the size. And I can tell you, it's a perfect example of why gerrymandering has to stop. This district has been so gerrymandered. In fact, I think it's probably the worst one in Illinois, because they've typically in District 13 have cut out the metro areas, the urban areas. So that has been kind of reserved for the 13th. And so you're looking at a huge geographical area to cover. So the way that I tried to do that, starting with getting signatures, because that's in this whole process, you have to start getting signatures. And so one of the ways we did this is me and my small campaign staff, we went to parades, we went to festivals during the summer, because that all starts in August and September. And in fact, I didn't announce my candidacy till about the mid-September. So I had about half the time to get the signatures that everybody else did when they started. And the thing I feel good about is I got double the signatures that I needed in half the time. So I knew that the message that I was delivering to people was being well received. I've had Democrats, Republicans, and independents sign my petition to get on the ballot. And, the thing about that is what I found when I went to these festivals, and I went door to door. In fact, I will tell you, some people said, "Oh, I've not had a politician ever knock on my door." And sometimes my campaign director gives me a hard time because we would block off certain, areas to work, and he would cover 15, 20 houses, and I'm still at one. And the reason this is important, because I would knock on a door. I didn't know if it was Democrat, Republican, Independent. And sometimes people would see at first the party that I was running for, and they would be on the other side, and they're saying, I can't take it anymore. I can't do that. And I said, you know what? You don't have to sign my petition. You don't have to sign. I want to tell you why I'm running, and I want to understand what you're struggling with. And I will tell you, out of the 3,000 over signatures I got, I was responsible myself for probably around 700 of those. And I will tell you that the thing that touched my heart the most is a lot of people, when they said they weren't interested in signing, signed. I had very few people that didn't sign after I talked to them. And one of the things they told me, they said, you're the real thing. And I said, you're right, because I don't know how to be anything but the real thing. I grew up, raised by my aunt and uncle, and the things that were important were to work hard and be honest and try to put yourself in another person's position so that you can understand where they're coming from. And that's what I found when I talked with people, because a lot of them would say, we just want things to be normal again. Can you just make things normal? And I said, I'm going to try. And so my heart is in this. I was retired. You don't come into running for office at my age and want to be a career politician. I have no desire to do that. But I'm motivated by the fact that we are, I think we can do this if the people go and vote. People weren't divided. When I talked to people, the people were ready for things to be calm, and they weren't as much divided as our political leaders are divided. So I was encouraged to see that, and I just think I can make that difference.
And that is Judy Bowlby, a Republican candidate in the 15th U.S. House District. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation right here on the WTIM Morning Show on your information station.
Your information station, WTIM.
Now on the RFD Radio Network, I'm Jim Taylor. Two-sided trade with corn, beans, and Chicago wheat. May corn down 4.42.5. July corn down 3 1/4, 4.52 1/4. New crop December 4.68.5, down 2 3/4. May beans up 3 1/2, 11.74. July beans up 4, 11.87 1/4. November new crop 11.32.5, up a penny. May wheat down 5 3/4, 568 1/4. July KC wheat 584 3/4, down 6 3/4. May bean meal 311.90, down 280. May bean oil 63.20, up 38 cents. Livestock trade March feeders 362.67, up 547. April live cattle up 425, 238.35. April lean hogs 96.02, up 27 cents. Energy market April crude oil down 60 cents, 73.97. And this is the RFD Radio Network.
The Lady Tornado basketball team are on 96.5 thechill.com again this season. Listen on air or online for Lady Tornado basketball and playoff games, brought to you by the Taylorville Community Credit Union, the Christian County YMCA, Rural Rentals, and Scooters Coffee.
The purple and gold are coming your way. The Taylorville Tornadoes are going to do it today.
Hi, this is Jim Baker, Republican candidate for Christian County Sheriff in the March 17th primary, and I'm ready for this job on day one. I've served in law enforcement for 27 years. Now as our Chief Deputy Sheriff, I'm running for Sheriff to continue our important work of protecting our county. I'm a strong conservative who supports our constitutional rights and will work to keep our county safe every day. Again, I'm Jim Baker, and I would be honored to have your vote for Sheriff in the Republican primary on March 17th. Thank you. Paid for by Jim Baker for Christian County Sheriff.
Your locally owned Scooters Coffee at routes 29 and 104 in Taylorville are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the WTIM Tornado Give Back promotion. Scooters Coffee will donate the following to the Taylorville Sports Boosters. For each Tornado varsity football touchdown, they're donating $10. For each three-point shot in varsity Tornado boys and girls basketball games, they're donating $3. And $5 for each home run scored by varsity baseball and softball team. The 22 local Scooters Coffee Taylorville, thank you for your business. Amazing people, amazing drinks, amazingly fast.
Pana schools provide excellence in education and are rooted in the Pana community. Become a part of Panther Pride and find out the great things happening in Pana schools by clicking their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Jansen's Heating and Air is the home of Dr. Comfort, focusing on customer care for heating and air conditioning across Central Illinois for some 35 years. Find out their services, specials, and coupons by clicking their icon on TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
WTIM.
Welcome back to the WTIM Morning Show on your information station. The show is sponsored by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Reed Kamai, and I continue my conversation for the next few minutes with Judy Bowlby, a Republican candidate for the 15th U.S. House District. Next question I was going to ask is, you've talked a little bit about how you had sort of worked with policymakers in the past to kind of craft policy. What do you hope that voters will use to judge your performance if you end up getting elected into office?
Okay. Well, I would encourage them to go out to my website where there's a lot of history on me. It's Judy Bowlby for Congress. And there you'll find my website where it goes over the history that I've had in terms of bringing effective legislation during my working career to them. And then the other thing, I also have a phone number on there. I am taking my own calls. I'm reaching out. I'm answering emails. And I would encourage people to go out to that website and check it out. You know, one of the things I wanted to bring up when we were talking before, when I see this conflict that's going on in the country, one of my favorite songs, I thought of it as I was out in your waiting room and listening to the radio and I heard a Beatles song, Let It Be. And it reminded me of another favorite song of mine from the Beatles, and that's Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And I feel that this state, this country is in troubled waters, and I feel like I can be that bridge. And I've done it for 30 years, and I want to do it for the people of the 15th District because they are in needed help, and they deserve better than what they're getting.
Yeah. So, we're into the last minute. I know you sort of began to say this, but I was going to offer you the chance to make a final pitch to voters and answer this question. Why should voters choose you for the nomination?
They should choose me first because I'm real. Second, because my history it shows 30 years of experience of working already in government in terms of bringing compromise to both Democrats and Republicans and getting things done. And they should do it to make their life better, because I know that I can do that. And I cannot emphasize enough that people really need to vote in the primary, because that's where moderates like I are running. And don't wait till November, because then your choice will be made too much for you.
Judy Bowlby, a Republican candidate for the U.S. House District number 15 in Illinois. Judy, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And thank you for listening.
The Big 870 WTIM Assumption Taylorville. 96.1 FM Taylorville. 107.